Started. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Katie. I'm the general manager at ADAC, and we're so happy to have you here. We're actually really more excited to welcome you back to Discover ADAC in person. So thank you, everyone. It's great to see your faces again, even masked. We're glad to have you here. So I just want to remind everyone to pick up a copy of the event guide. They're located on the tables in the back. That is the schedule of events for the week, so you know where to be. A lot of our events do have limited capacity, so if there's something that you want to be a part of, make sure you register in advance, because we will have to stick to that. And with that, I'm just going to go ahead and turn everything over to Susanna Cullen Hamilton with Atlanta Homes and Lifestyles to open up this talk.
Great. Thank you, Katie, and thank you to ADAC, and thank you to Mackenzie Johnson, without whom this would never have been pulled off, for all of the technology things that we have going on today, because we have a special situation that one of our guests is actually on set on the Drew Barrymore show. But first, I want to welcome all of you and thank you for coming. It's great to see you in person. And we want to thank our sponsor, Upcountry Home, and we hope you'll join us upstairs after this presentation. I've lived in California for the past decade, and they've got a beautiful blend of Santa Barbara and Montecito sort of meets the South. And they will be giving each of you a gift bag with cheese straws and salted caramels and Prosecco. And I feel sort of like The Price is Right now. But anyway, please join us upstairs. Anyway, we want to get started. I know people are still trickling in, but we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to introduce you to two fabulous designers today. In fact, I think two of the best people working in the business right now. They have so much in common. They've never met, and yet they really finish their projects very differently and distinctively. I'd like to introduce you on the big screen to Mikkel Welch. He's a native of Michigan, but he's lived in Atlanta, Miami, and New York. He has been on, well, he's actually designed homes for luxury level clients, as well as VIP green rooms for Michelle Obama, Oprah Winfrey, Harry Connick Jr., Halle Berry, Faith Hill, and a long roster of people in the celebrity world. Today, he has been on Trading Spaces, HGTV, Good Morning America, and today he's part of the Drew crew. He is now part of Drew Barrymore's show, where they take really well-deserving people and create fabulous spaces for them. So welcome to Mikkel Welch. We wish he was here, but Drew booked him, so we've got him in the green room. So thank you for being with us, Mikkel.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for that fabulous intro. I feel like you should be my publicist.
Well, I'm not done yet, because I've got to introduce one of my favorite people in the business, and one of my close friends who is just ready to deliver a comment to me. Actually, Bob Brown really is an incredibly talented designer. He's got one of the most discerning eyes in the business, super sophisticated, creates exquisite luxury level homes for his roster of both national and now international clientele. And while Bob is globe-trotting around the world with all these fabulous people, he's also shopping and stocking his amazing store, Townhouse, which is next door in the galleries of Peachtree Hills. It's now 3 stories. That's really one of the best shops in Atlanta. It mixes antiques, mid-century modern art, sculpture, decorative art. So I hope you'll stop in and see him. And that really brings us to why we're here today, to talk about the details. Because even though these two men have actually never met, they have an extraordinary amount in common. And they both design exquisite rooms that are very tailored and exacting. They use a monochromatic envelope in their rooms, but they fill them with incredible details. They mix antiques with organic materials, with art, with sculpture, and that's what we're here to talk about today. Is their ability to find pieces from different places and different periods and meld them seamlessly in their interiors. And so that brings us to our first question, which is monochromatic envelopes. Both of you start with a monochromatic envelope, a very neutral shell of walls, floor, and ceiling. You use a palette that ranges from white to cream, charcoal to rich black, tan to chocolate brown or a dove gray slate, but you use luxurious materials. But my question is, did you start there? You're both so experienced, or has that been something that's evolved as your taste has become more refined. Mikkel, can you tell me if you started there, or is that something that has evolved?
I would say for me, it was an evolution. I came from a set design background where on television, everything needs to be strong, jewel tones. Where when I would go home, I would want things that were a little more subdued. And I found for my clients, they would prefer something on the more neutral side where they could stack and layer color if need be. And so for me, it definitely was an evolution, but it was one of those things when I found that sweet spot, I knew I hit it and I knew this was my lane and that's where I wanted to stay.
And Mr. Brown?
I think we've always enjoyed a neutral background. Usually the background is setting the stage for something else, whether it's a great art collection or some beautiful furniture or what have you. I would say about 90% of our projects have a neutral background. That doesn't necessarily mean white. It could be black. It could be, charcoal. It could be chocolate brown. It could be some, mid-tone neutral. But I think a lot of times the background is really setting the stage for what's to come.
And I think then that really opens the next question and really why we're here today to talk about the details, because both of these designers have an extraordinary ability to find very disparate objects and bring them into a room and really meld them seamlessly. It's very sophisticated. Their rooms are intelligent. They're interesting. They're layered. And I hope you'll continue to watch these photographs on the loop. And as you listen to them speak, you'll see this. Mikkel, you really gravitate towards, your rooms are very organic. You use a lot of hand-hewn, handcrafted objects. They're live wood edges in your furniture. There are outdoor pieces. You use a lot of ethnically referenced things from Asia and Africa, but they have a very globally inspired aesthetic. Can you tell us what inspires you and how you arrived at that?
Yes, so here's the thing. I mean, let's face it, beige is boring. And so in order to make beige not boring, it does require a certain level of layering and sophistication. I think when you have lighter color objects, you really need to storytell. And so for me, jokingly, I call my design style primitive modern. And I really go with the thought process of take Fred Flintstone and put him in 2021. And what would Fred do? And so Fred is going to go and he's going to pick up, some raw edge material and he's going to bring it home and turn it into a coffee table. And so for me, it's finding things that are neutral, that have character, patina. I look for things that aren't perfect. For me, the biggest thing whenever I'm shopping for items, I love to find this kind of like 30% balance of things that are perfect, but then that other 60% have imperfections, because I think in those imperfections, that's where you really get to storytell and create some interesting pieces, even if they are of a neutral hue.
Thank you. Okay, Bob, on the other hand, has really polished interiors. There's always brass, brushed bronze, a drop of gold, mirror, polished furniture. It's a very cosmopolitan, very elegant look. Again, it's a monochromatic envelope, but these are really very, very glamorous. You sort of ooze glamour. Even when they're matte, you ooze glamour. So what inspires you when you're traveling around the world? What catches your eye?
That's interesting. Well, first of all, it cracks me up when I hear people talking about describing our work, like oozing or whatever. I don't know. I mean, I shop all the time. I feel like that's all I do, which I love. And it's looking for things that are unique, different, odd. I just got back from a trip to Europe just shopping, and I found great things. I mean, I found a pair of bronze, actually there were a sculpture that was cut off here. So they're just legs and feet, but they're so interesting looking. So it's always about finding things that are different or interesting. And, I have a bad habit of just buying stuff. I'm sure some client's going to want it at some point. And, it's not really a method to it. It's just finding things that speak to me. You can be in the flea market or you can be, downtown in Milan at some fancy antique store, and something just jumps out. It's like, that's going to be great for one of my clients.
Well, I think it is interesting, and as you watch this loop, you'll see Bob's show house room from 2020 is the white sofa with the paintings above it. And there's some very specific pieces in there that are sculptural that really counter that art beautifully. I don't know if that's a light or it's a marble top on a brass base, the round globe, but really good looking. And it only takes one fabulous thing. You'll see this charcoal, matte black sort of charcoal living room that Mikkel did, and in it, he's got this amazing, there's an early American ladder back chair. You've got sort of very clean 50s upholstery. And then hanging on the wall is this exquisite African cape. And so their ability to find these one objects is what's really special about your projects.
Yeah, Mikkel, I don't know about you, but sometimes you don't plan those things going in. You kind of set the stage when you're doing, the preliminary work on a project, and then something just speaks to you. Sometimes it's the opposite too. Sometimes you'll find a great, work of art, and like, I can build a room around this. So it kind of just happens. It's kind of an organic thing. And I think, once you really, get into the end of a project, putting those final pieces in or what have you, that's when it kind of all comes together. And sometimes you don't plan that up front. It just happens organically.
Right, and
I agree with you 100%. I would often say most of the times the things that gel or come out the best for me are things that maybe a piece didn't come in time, maybe something got broken, and it was one of those things where it was divine order and it was meant to happen, and that replacement piece always ends up being that place or the piece that was much better than I ever anticipated. And I run into that. So every show house I have, whatever piece cannot fit through the door or whatever that it ends up being, that's going to be the standout piece when I get the replacement all the time.
That's great, and that shows your ability to adapt. It shows your comfort zone of going outside and finding different things and being willing to work with that. And that's also the sign of a really sophisticated, experienced designer when they can transition that quickly. So there's one thing that these two people have been masterful at, and I don't know that we talk about this enough. In today's market, we hear all about my brand, my brand, my brand, my book, my book, my book, and all the calling cards that are on the roster. But these two people have really diversified their businesses into extremely different, highly creative, and singular ways. Mikkel has diversified into this explosive television career as well as a line with YHD Furniture. And Bob has diversified with now 3 stories of really incredible inventory in Townhouse and aligned with Holland McRae. So that's something we don't talk a lot about, but when you see people diversify differently and handle their business models differently, I think that's really interesting and how that influences your interior. So Mikkel, tell us about your transition from television and this line you created with YHD and how either that's influenced you or you've influenced that.
I'll give the short version. You, of course, know the long version. But honestly, my story is a story of just being open to opportunities. Long story short, I was participating in Las Vegas market, and I took my mother with me, and I had just given a huge tour of like 60 of my favorite showrooms to a big group of like 50 people. And afterwards, I really just wanted to go back to my dressing room. And my mom says, you know what? I want to stop in that showroom and get a free bag. And she said, will you go with me? And I'm like, lady, this is the last showroom that we go in to get free bags because they want to talk to me. Well, when we walk into the showroom, I made a comment about a piece of art, and a woman turns around and she says, hey, what did you say about that piece of artwork? And I'm like, oh God, I put my foot in my mouth. And she says, well, why don't you tell me what else you think? And so we walked around the showroom, and about an hour later, she gives me her business card, and she ended up being the vice president of Yosemite Home Decor. And she said that she was looking for a designer to partner with. And that's how my collection came about. So I tell that story that you never really know what opportunities are around the corner. And to be prepared, for when these opportunities arise. But again, the design world is so small. So always be open to opportunities, and be nice in these showrooms, because you never know who you're going to, like, where your next opportunity is seriously going to come from.
And Bob?
Well, yeah, similarly, I mean, I never set out to have a furniture line, but my friend Mary, who owns Holly McRae, reached out and said, hey, do you want to, put a little collection together? And I said, well, of course. I mean, that's such a flattering thing. And, it really, it's worked really well. Mary does beautiful furniture. It's all about quality. It's all bench made in the UK, all the things that, really spoke to me, it meant a lot to me. And she does a lot of, antique reproductions and, beautiful traditional things, but that wasn't quite my vibe. So what I really liked and what worked for us at putting this collection together was taking, traditional pieces, but kind of simplify them. Like I have a sideboard that was based on an antique that we just took all the goop off, all the whatever. And it's more of my look, which is, I love traditional, I love antiques, but I like things really simplified. And it just kind of worked. And, it's like, I get a little check every once in a while, which is amazing. And, she produces this beautiful furniture, and it just kind of happened organically, which I think is like you, it's just kind of the best way. I mean, if I'd spent, a lot of money with a PR person and a, sourcing person to find me a collection, I don't think it would be quite as easy as it's been.
Well, I think your collections are very different, but they really and truly look like you.
Yeah.
They do look like both of you, and so do you both use them a lot in your projects?
It is the kind of thing that we'll, what we do is rely on Mary to have it on our showroom floor, and we go grab it at the end. Like, why didn't we put, a Kimberly sideboard in this project, or why didn't we put one of our other things? And that's what works really well for us here in Atlanta. Having my resource here makes it super easy.
Yeah. And what about you, Mikkel?
No, I do use a combination of my pieces. I try not to go overboard with it so it doesn't feel like a Mikkel Welch infomercial when I'm designing my spaces. But if it makes sense, the scale is right, I will definitely use the piece.
Yeah, and the same with me. I've never, in a presentation said, this is one of my pieces, you've got to have it. I just don't feel comfortable with that. But, if it works, it works.
No, but I think sometimes designers create collections based on either things they can't find and they've had to have custom made repeatedly, or things they found that are one of a kind and they just absolutely love it and they just want to keep using it. It's a great piece and it just works no matter what the period of the house, style of the house, it just works. So even though we've talked about your use of monochromatic and your subtle use of color, both of you do use color, and sometimes it's bold, and sometimes it's evolving a little more, but are there certain color palettes that you really gravitate towards that you love, or are there certain things that you really cannot stand and you stay away from? Mikkel?
I'm always going to go to darker, moodier hues. So I'm going to go to hues of black, blue, gray. Sometimes I'm leaning more towards greens, if it's the right green. But I'm going to go on that smoky side, just because for me, it's a familiar base. Right. And I do feel like it pairs nice with any other neutral. So I'm going to go with the smoky Pharaoh and Ball type of hues. That's my vote.
You, on the other hand, are...
Well, I mean, in my old age, I've really changed. There were colors early in my career that I hated. I hated rust. I hated purple. Kind of lilac-y colors. I just don't know why. I just didn't care for those colors. And a couple of times clients asked for those things. We would do them, and we did them successfully. But the older I get, I am so into color that probably people that would know my work would probably argue a little bit about that. Even though it's just accents, I am so intrigued by mixing odd colors now. I just got back from Milan and Paris last week, and I've got all these crazy colors in my mind, mixing peach with red and chartreuse with everything else. I mean, it's just such an interesting thing. There's always been very European colors, but I think they're fresh right now. We started pulling a plan yesterday for a project, and you get inspiration from colors from everywhere. And I was staying at the Mandarin in Milan, and the water glass was this opalescent kind of crazy blue. And of course, I was drinking wine. So there was a red wine beside it. And I was like, oh my God, those colors. Oh, and then there was a gray marble table. So I was taking pictures left and right, sending them to Lana, saying, that's what we need to do for, this client. And yeah, I think I'm so into color right now, even though you're telling everybody that we have a neutral background, and which we do a lot of that.
No, I think you have a neutral background, but I think you use a lot of color
really
in different places, and they're powerful
colors.
punches.
Yeah.
But I also have to ask both of you, do you think some of this has been a result of COVID, and we've been at home, and I think people are looking for bright spots? I mean, like, are we more receptive to it than we were before? Were we just going so quickly? And now, the difference is, I don't think either of you have ever used a floral chintz. They don't use color in that way. They use color in bold strokes. And even Mikkel, if yours are smoky, there's still color. And Bob, even if yours is a powerful punch of a fuchsia pillow, there's color. But I just wonder if some of this that we're seeing is a result, and I don't know what your thoughts are, of just coming out of this period where we've been at home and our masks are blue, medical masks are white, or they're black, and now we're just kind of looking. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know the color thing. I don't know. I just know we're all busy as heck because of COVID, which we're all blessed and thankful for. Maybe people are being a little more open to things. We've thrown a few things out there that we normally would be a little afraid of, that, clients have like, yeah, I get that. That's a good thing. So yeah, maybe. I don't know how you bring that back to the COVID thing, but
no, I just didn't know if people had been at home and they were more receptive to brighter spaces.
People certainly want to do stuff. We have one great client, and she has all this dark trim in her house, and from day one we're like, you need to paint all this out. This was years ago. She'd been home a few weeks with COVID and said, you're right, this is like a dungeon. We've got to paint. Like, we told you so, but that's fine.
So both of these men have a very interesting background, and that is to say they both started in menswear, and I think that's had a huge impact on their design. But I'd like you, Mikkel, I know you've got to go soon, so can you go ahead and tell us about your start in menswear and how that influenced your beginning, as well as how it still influences you today?
Sure. So I started out, I graduated from Morehouse College, right in the city. And after college, I was just trying to figure out what to do. And I ended up taking a job at Bloomingdale's at Perimeter Mall. And while I was there, I learned I hate selling clothes. Hate it. But on my lunch break, I remember having this aha moment. I was in Crate and Barrel, had spent about 45 minutes of my little 50-minute break there. And it was kind of like this little montage of running through my head of all of these Metropolitan Home magazines that I had stacked up, all of these accessories in the closet that I didn't have a client for. And it's just maybe you like design. So that love took me to Storehouse Furniture, which also was an Atlanta-based company. And from there, I kind of cut my teeth and got into the world of design. And one of the first designers that I worked for was a male designer. And so I took a lot of influence just from, his designs. And so as I began to move into my career, I began to work with the comedian Steve Harvey. And he asked me to create a space that was masculine and smoky. And this is 2007. So when that happened, this was around the time when that cheesy term man cave came about. I ended up becoming this man cave designer where, everybody wanted this smoky lounge that didn't offend their wives, the rest of her decor. And so I ended up using men's suiting fabric for drapery and, reupholstering chairs and cornices. And so it was just one of those things where it's how can I make a high-end space that's not going to, or a space that won't be offensive to your wife and is an extension of your home and not a frat house. And so that's kind of where I started with playing with men's fabric.
And Mr. Brown, you had a 20-year career in fashion before you moved over into the interiors market.
I did. It's so funny. I was thinking today about my friend Clint Smith wrote an article about me one time early in my design career saying, that Bob spent 2 decades in the fashion arena. when you start talking about decades, you're defining your life in decades. That's a lot. But now I've been in interior design for 2 decades. It's crazy, but yeah, it just kind of organically happened. When I was in college, I didn't want to leave Athens, Georgia, because it was the best place and the most fun in the whole world. And so I started working in a men's store just to, have fun for a few more years. And it just kind of happened. Then I became a buyer for a men's store, and they were going to move me to Chicago, and it was so cold there, and I didn't want to go. And so my wife now, she was my girlfriend at the time, said, hey, there's a manufacturer in North Georgia, my hometown, that's, an apparel manufacturer. So I went in on a Thursday, had an interview. They called me Friday and said, the job's yours. I'm like, oh, hold on, I'm not sure if I want to move to a small town. And then 20 years later, I was still at this company as the EVP, and it spent a long time in, apparel manufacturing and design, which was great. But I got to a point where it was time to make a change, and I loved interior design. I'd studied it, after the fact as a hobby, because there's not a lot to do in a small town if you don't play golf and you leave the office at 5 o'clock. And decided to get into design. Just one day said, hey, I'm going to be an interior designer, and got a client, and it started happening. And it's all about our clients, of course, and that worked really well. And but in general, fabrics are fabrics, and scale is scale, and proportion is proportion. And I know a heck of a lot about fabrics, way more than any interior designer needs to know. But it was a very easy transition from fashion to interior design, I think.
And speaking of transition, we're going to keep talking about that, but Mikkel has to go join Drew Barrymore. So, Mikkel, I want to thank you, and I'm looking at him on this camera over here. Mikkel, thank you so much for being with us today. It was a pleasure. We've loved having you. And give Drew our best. Tell her.
I will, and thank you for having me. Sorry I couldn't be there in person, but I really appreciate you all in the audience taking the time to sit here and listen. So thank you again.
Well, we hope you'll join us in Atlanta in person next time. But thank you.
Yes, take care.
Bye. Okay, so Bob and I are going to continue for a few minutes, if that's okay with
now
you.
We can really talk.
No, yeah, grab a drink. Okay, so anyway, but to get back to the menswear, when you started, your interiors were heavily influenced. I mean, I remember you used to do.
I do think so. I mean, I remember a very early show house that we did. That I just remembered for some reason. We did gray flannel on the walls. We did a faux alligator on the sofas, like for a belt. We even made blue pillows, and I went and bought Tiffany cufflinks to put on the pillows. And that was probably overkill for this whole menswear look thing we did. But yeah, I've always liked that. I mean, and it's not just, the menswear fabrics and all this, it's the details, whether it's covering a seam or, a beautiful deep hem or something that just, speaks to me from fashion in general.
But you've always paid attention to the hand of a fabric. I mean, that's always been incredibly important to you.
Yeah, it's funny. Yesterday, Lon and I were looking at some fabrics, and I'm like, we like the pattern. And I'm like, I couldn't get over it. It just felt so good. And I looked on the back, and it had not one natural fiber in it, which normally I don't love. I'm like, this feels so good. I do think it's all about the hand and the way it's going to perform, when it's installed. And I do like that. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I'm saying in the drape. But I mean, I remember that there were a lot of times that you would use draperies, and it looked like they could have a big window pane. I mean, very subtle, but a big window pane. I just thought about that.
Yeah, I love a wool chalet on the windows, and it is about how it performs and drapes. And I don't think some people think that far into something, but we always try to do that. Like, how is this really going to make up? And sometimes, like you said earlier, that we don't use chintzes and cabbage roses and stuff. And I think some of that's because, like, well, when that's pleated on a drapery, how is that going to work? How is it going to fall and such? So I think that's why we use a lot of plains or simple patterns.
But I would never describe your interiors as messy or chaotic or frenetic. I mean, they're very exacting. They're very precise.
Well, my life is messy, chaotic, and a mess. So we do try to organize. I do think I like how our interiors are pretty smart and simple and well organized. And it's so funny. Some clients love it like that. and never touch a thing. And then some clients you'll go back and visit and like, this is nothing like we left you with, you know.
Well, you don't talk about this much, but it is evident that your spaces, you are very cognizant of the light, the natural light. And you don't talk about that a lot, but it is something that your rooms, part of that has to do with that monochromatic room, but especially, as you'll see, one of the slides in here is a Manhattan living room. And it's hard to compete with a view like that,
Yeah.
but you did a fabulous job. But the light in all of these rooms, I mean, you're able, we're looking at that incredible custom wallpaper, and that could have been a dark space, but it wasn't in the dining room. So I think that whether you don't really talk about it, but I do think you're very cognizant of the natural light in a space.
Lighting's important, in general. I don't know that we're experts. We hire people to help us sometimes with lighting, because sometimes lighting is very tough. Oh, that's the project you're talking about. I mean, that was great, but the skyline was really the art. I mean, that was a fun project and very bright. And we had to think about how the light was coming into the space, and that was a fun little project.
But you didn't shy away, because right there's gold and brass and bronze.
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't shy away from, even with that much light, you still, it was still spit and
I don't
polish.
think we're shy in what we do. I think we
No,
are
you're
pretty
not shy.
bold. I think you have to be a little bold and push the envelope a little bit to I mean, I love an all-white interior. I love, simple things. If that's what the client wants, that's fine. But I think you really have to be smart about that and push.
So you are working on so many projects right now, and you have over the course of 20 years.
I know, we're almost done. I need to get back to the office. We're almost done.
So tell us about the difference about how you work. I mean, do you have a preference over coming in on the front side on a new construction project and being in on that really front side versus how many historic homes, or how often are you called in on a job where there's existing and you've got to?
Yeah, there's no rhyme or reason to it. I mean, I love, if it's going to be a new construction, I want to be involved day one. I want to be involved early. Sometimes we get involved where it's, construction started and the architect didn't think that we might want a king-size bed on that wall, or, things that, functionally that we can contribute to. So I do love that. But at the moment, we have a lot of new construction. If I have to pick out one more damn faucet, I mean, it's hard. I mean, it's a lot of details of things that are important, but you get bogged down in. But on the flip side, I mean, I love a historical piece of property that you go into and it's got an amazing character. And you think about it, very differently from a design point of view. Maybe the furniture does not need to be as important. Maybe the art needs to be subtle. Maybe you really do want to focus on the architecture. Sometimes the envelope is super simple. A couple of new constructions we're doing now, we're taking all the architecture out because the clients want a big art collection, that kind of thing. But on the flip side, I love just doing the opposite. We're invited to do a hotel overseas, and it's a historic Art Nouveau building with some beautiful details in it that we're trying to restore, and I think that's just amazing. So the furniture we're picking and the colors we're doing are super simple.
So I have to ask you this, because a lot of times, especially, there's a lot of repetition in this business, and there are people who will do the same thing in every single dining room. They go to the same wallpaper, and they put the same wallpaper in the same dining room, and it's almost in the same colorway, and we see it over and over and over again. Your rooms are not repetitive.
Yeah, I'm pretty
nor
sure we
Mikkel's.
do that.
I think they're very different, and I think that is another sign of a very evolved and sophisticated designer. But do you have pieces that are, or lines, or things that are anchors, if you will, or are you always, is every project fresh and new?
Every project is fresh and new. We may gravitate towards colors, or we may gravitate towards, fabrics, because we know they perform well, or something like that. And we have vendors that we like for different reasons, because they ship and they have a lot of inventory and their prices are good, or what have you. But we take every project fresh and new. We might reference something that was successful in the past, but I don't think we've ever repeated a project or a fabric or a look in any way. I think it's important. I think that's a respectful thing for the client who's paying you for a new idea. They've hired us because of who we are. They like our work, but they don't want us to duplicate exactly what we've done.
Right. Okay, I have more questions for Bob, but we are running out on time, so I wanted to give you all a chance. Are there questions that you would like to ask Bob? Yes?
I'm interested in seating arrangement and distances. Oftentimes, you think about how far you stand next to somebody to have an intimate conversation. Yet so much of the time, I see the seating, especially in the living room, where the distances are much greater and the chairs aren't facing each other. What's your thoughts on intimate seating conversations?
Well, what I first think of is the show house we just completed. And it's a quick interesting story is I was in Dubai working. Phoebe Howard was the chair of the show house, called me and said, hey, we do the living room. I said, sure, 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 after a few glasses of wine. And I didn't know that the room was like 30 by 24, I mean, a gargantuan living room. So when I started really working on it, I was like, I need to really turn this into several seating areas, which we did. Because I do think that there's a conversation area. Like, I don't want to be any further from Susanna other than I am now, because we can talk. So we always consider that, how you're going to interact with the people next to you. Even at a dining table, I was at an event Saturday night, and, a typical, big event where there were 10 people at a table, and people across the, 10 top table I couldn't talk to, and they were trying to talk, and I'm old, I can't hear, and it was loud, and it's just like, I'm so sorry, but I can't, hear you. So we really try to take in, functionality of a space is super important to us, really more so than the pretty art or the great color fabric or whatever. It's how does that function, and where's the TV? That's typically a big part of the space.
Are there other questions? Yes?
So from a design perspective, how do you see fashion versus design industry, the interplay?
Well, it's interesting. I think when I first started this business, our industry was a season or two behind what fashion was doing, whether it was color or fabrics or, whatever. I think we're right on top of each other right now. So I was in Milan last week, and we're working on a project in town, and we had a kind of a color palette we liked. So I walked in, was looking around. The product doesn't make things big enough for me, so I was really just, scoping it out. And I saw this section of new hard case luggage that was the most beautiful color palette. I was like, oh my God, that's the color palette we needed to do for this project. And it's kind of what we were leaning towards anyway, and it kind of confirmed that. There was a suitcase in Merlot, there was one in this really cool blue and a gray, and it just was beautiful. But so I take a lot of color inspiration from fashion, and now everything in Paris and Milan the last couple of weeks was all about texture. Every piece of, a lady's suit or a men's sweater, everything at the flea market was covered in crazy texture. Boucle, faux fur, like super textures. And I think we're right on top of each other now.
As you can tell by Bob's shoes. And on Saturday night, his shoes said left and right, so that if he drank too much, he could still get his shoes on the right feet. So yeah, there's always...
Which I've been known to do.
So there is an interplay, and I think it's still, but I do think you've evolved. I mean, I do think that...
Well, yeah, excited to say I am almost 60-ish, and yeah, I do new stuff every day, and I love what we do, and it's learning and doing different things. Definitely have evolved, and I think we all have. Anybody in design or architecture, what have you, you have to evolve. And I'm pretty happy where we are now. I like what we're doing more than ever. I think we're bolder with clients, and not to tell them what to do necessarily, but take their ideas and, manipulate them a bit to a good place. Maybe in the past when we couldn't pay the bills, we were like, okay, if you want to do that, that's fine. But now we're a little bolder in what we're doing. So at the end of the day, we get these great results. So
Well,
it's
you're
fun.
also, you've got a big team, but now you're working internationally, and that's another dynamic. That's a whole different dynamic in many facets as far as creating and working with the other partners there and the client there, and then the installation and the shipping. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that, as well as different aesthetics. I mean, do they request things that are
Well,
slightly,
The projects we're doing, they hired us because they like what we did. And they think that, American design is great. So we do kind of do our thing, but we've learned a lot. Personalities, the way you do things. We Southerners sometimes are, sugarcoat everything, and a lot of times they're like, tell you what to do, and they're like, you have your feelings hurt, and I'm like, that's a cultural thing, I shouldn't have my feelings hurt about stuff. But that's been a little interesting curve working with different cultures, for sure.
yeah.
But great, some great things are coming.
Yeah, you've had fabulous
Yeah, some good
fabulous
projects.
projects. Really, really wonderful. Do we have any more questions? Yes?
Hi, Bob Brown. How are you?
Hello.
Good.
I love the
Good. My
color
question
difference.
to you is, if you could have dinner with any fashion designer, who would you have dinner with, and why?
Oh, that's interesting. Live today, or can I have somebody that's already passed? Well, I'm a huge fan of Bill Blass's for a lot of different reasons, and love what he did. And I'm also would probably, someone that's there today, Tom Ford. I'm sorry, his partner just passed away yesterday, which is really sad. But I like what he does. Just taking, like last night on the Emmys, the Ted Lasso guy had on a velvet suit in the most gorgeous blue color. Like, well, how'd you think of that?
And it was long.
It was great.
a long
It was. It just.
Tied
It
on the
was so
side.
great. But
Style.
yeah, I think that's who it would be.
Good question.
Good question.
Are there any more questions?
Are your clients familiar with the pricing, or are they unrealistic about what it should cost?
That's interesting. Some clients are very in tune, very in the know. Some clients are surprised. I mean, sometimes we're the first design firm someone's worked with, and we have to educate them. And we do a lot of that up front. We're very transparent. We're very honest. We want the client's expectations to be extremely realistic. If not, it's not going to work. We tell potential clients, we're interviewing you just as much as you're interviewing us, and not that we're being snobby, but it's just we want it to be a great fit. The way to get a great end product is we work well together. The trick right at the moment is prices are going up like crazy because of what's going on in the world. So it's a little bit of a a little different take for us. Like shipping right now is crazy. I was, bought things in Europe the last couple of weeks, and, kept thinking about the prices were really good at the antique places and the art places I went, but then all of a sudden I started worrying about shipping because shipping is crazy expensive right now. Just the price of getting a container, and then when is it going to get here? So those are some new things that we and clients are learning at the same time.
Any more questions?
During your career in menswear, did you design anything iconic?
No, and I'm not going to answer that.
You designed the Blockbuster shirt.
Well, it's funny. At one point, we had a division that did uniforms. So yes, I designed the Blockbuster Video polo shirt, which was just a gold shirt with blue cuffs and a blue collar. It wasn't all that. But thank you, Laura, from my great team, for bringing that up.
Do you still have one?
I do not, but the coolest thing we did, we had a license agreement with Wimbledon, and we did the Wimbledon stuff for a
That
long
is
time.
fun.
That was
That is fun.
A little more chic, a little more sophisticated.
Yeah, I think you can.
But we
you can
sold
come up
hundreds
with
of
that.
thousands of Blockbuster shirts, so.
So you're here. Well, thank you all so much for being here with us. Please join us upstairs at Upcountry Home. And please stay for the rest of ADAC. Enjoy today and tomorrow. We're glad you're here. Katie, do you have any further announcements?
That's perfect. And thank you to Atlanta Homes and Lifestyles for bringing this awesome presentation to us
Thank
today.
you. It was our pleasure.
Thanks, guys.